Greetings, my friends. Welcome back to Mike Allen from Chicagoland. At the time of this recording, it is Thursday, December 29th, getting an early start to the morning here. I'll be posting this video in January of 2023, so that'll be about the time you'll be watching this, hopefully. But I've come to realize I haven't done a lot of videos talking about, my personal background and where I came from. That was really by design. I really kind of wanted to focus on content and things that interest me, and I'll still do some of that here in this video, but I just wanted to take this time just to share a little bit about my background, and I thought what better place to do that than in the town of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So not only am I knocking off another state on my quest to visit all 50 states here on this channel, but also it gives me an opportunity to visit my childhood hometown. So hope you'll come and join me on this journey, and let's get started. So from 1982 to 1987, I lived here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My father worked as a personnel manager for the General Mills plant here in town, and it's the first place I remember living. I was age 2 when we moved here and was age 7 when we moved out, and my dad took a job up at General Mills corporate offices in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And then after about a year in Minneapolis, we moved back to the Chicago area, which we were originally from. But I have a lot of fond memories of Cedar Rapids, so that's why I thought this would be a great time to just kind of share some childhood memories of my first place I remember living at. And I'm starting out here in this empty field because this is what used to be Westdale Mall, a place that my mom took me shopping at several times. We got a lot of the anchor stores here, Burlington Coat Factory. I'm sure that U-Haul was probably a Sears or something like that. We got Ross, Dress for Less, and then this Penny store here is one of the last remaining anchor stores from when the mall originally opened in the 1970s. But yeah, all this empty land here used to be the mall. What I've known, what I remember of Westdale has long since passed. With like a lot of old mall properties around the country, they're finding other ways to develop the land. Looks like they got some apartments / condos with retail space, doctor's offices on the bottom floor. So I mentioned earlier that I really like to focus on this channel on my interests and things that I have a lot of passion for, and a lot of things that I like to follow, and my various hobbies, so on and so forth. One of the things that I do love to follow on television are, true crime stories, especially cold cases, and in particular cold cases that have been solved and their murderers are brought to justice. I have a huge interest in that, mainly because I just have this desire to want to see mysteries be solved. And one of those mysteries happened right here in Cedar Rapids, and it was just recently solved. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that here soon. So right here in this JCPenney's parking lot of Westdale Mall, December 1979, the murder of 18-year-old Michelle Martinko took place. And that was before we had moved to town, but I learned about the murder very recently, probably within the last 10 years or so. And her killer was brought to justice 39 years to the day of her murder using 21st century technology. Her murder happened right around in here, and it was quite satisfying to see a story that I'd followed for about a decade finally be solved through genealogy. It's the same kind of technology that brought the Golden State Killer to justice. And pretty crazy that it was actually 39 years to the day that her murderer was arrested. So I like to watch a lot of Joe Kenda, the homicide hunter on Investigation Discovery, and he always says that the hardest cases to solve are stranger on stranger killings because there's no connection to the victim. Well, that was the case with Michelle Martinko. Her killer was a complete stranger and the crime appeared to be completely random. So that was why it took 39 years to finally bring him to justice, because there was no connection between the victim and the murderer. So he's now serving a life sentence, and thankfully he's off the streets. Now, I also have a huge passion for road trips, and particularly Route 66 and the Lincoln Highway and a lot of those old-time roads from back in the day when the networks of highways started to be built here in America. And I recently did a video about the Lincoln Highway as it runs right past the subdivision I live in. And fun fact here, Lincoln Highway also runs through Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So I could conceivably take this road all the way home, but it would probably take a few extra hours. So the few times I've been back to Cedar Rapids since we moved away, I always get this feeling like I'm stepping back in time to the 80s. And every time I'm in Cedar Rapids, which hasn't been many times, but when it does happen, I like to just get in the spirit of the 80s and listen to a lot of 80s music. So been listening to a lot of Duran Duran, some older Michael Jackson and Madonna stuff, some Phil Collins, things like that. Just something about this city just makes me feel like I'm back in the 80s again. Standing in downtown Cedar Rapids now, and one of the things I've always liked about this part of town is it still has kind of a city vibrancy to it while still being, you know, a small city. It's certainly not Chicago or St. Louis or even Des Moines, but it's still a city within itself and has that vibrancy to it that I enjoy anytime I come back here. If you ever visit Minneapolis, St. Paul, the downtown area of Minneapolis is filled with these walkways here, probably to protect you from the weather. This was always a highlight of my childhood. Coming to downtown Cedar Rapids was walking through these things. It's pretty early in the morning. I don't think I'd be able to get up in any of these, but I still wax nostalgic whenever I see these indoor walkways. This here's the Cedar River, which flows through downtown Cedar Rapids. Kind of frozen over here, but in the summertime, I remember this is a river, a raging river that's flowing right through town here. The downtown area was actually devastated with a flood a few years back when the river overflowed its banks. It's a story I kept a close eye on just because of my affinity for this town. So when we lived here, my mother graduated with an associate's degree from Kirkwood, which is one of the community colleges here in town. And I remember her graduation was in one of these old-timey buildings along the river. I just remember as a young kid misbehaving like crazy because I was bored out of my mind. And my father taking me outside and giving me a gigantic spanking here in front of the river. I do not spank my kids, but the 80s were different times. Cedar Rapids Gazette building, local newspaper in town, and the first newspaper I remember reading. Cedar Rapids is the largest corn processing city in the world, and you could definitely smell it because as I'm walking around downtown here, I smell that very familiar corn processing smell that I remember as a kid. It looks like the Italian beef has made its way into Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Haha, found a way to get up to the Cedar Rapids Skywalk. Oh boy, does this bring back memories. I realize this isn't the most riveting content in the world, but I'm really doing this for my own personal enjoyment. I feel like I'm 5 years old all over again. And the city keeps things warm and toasty inside these skywalks. And you got to have the pigeons to add to the city vibrancy I was talking about earlier. And the Cedar Rapids Skywalk is all interwoven and connected. Okay, now I got to try to remember where I parked. I'm doing so much wandering around here that I kind of lost any sense of where I was. I feel like Leslie Nielsen in The Naked Gun when he said, "And where the hell was I?" Success. On to the next stop. So one of the Cedar Rapids parking garages didn't even charge me for parking. That was quite nice of them. Paid an arm and a leg in St. Louis. I can now smell the corn processing smell seeping into my car. Made my way to the east end of town now in Bever Park. This was our entertainment growing up as a kid. I see Old McDonald's Farm is still around, but they're closed for the season. That's a children's petting zoo. Playground equipment has definitely changed. Looks nothing like it did in the past. It was an old fire truck here that the kids used to be able to play on, as well as a merry-go-round. I doubt you'll see many of those types of things in children's parks today. I know I haven't seen them in the parks I take my kids to. And back in the 80s, I remember every year Bever Park used to host a bike race. Pretty sure this is the spot here where they would host the big wheel races, which I participated in a couple times. Didn't win, but still a fond memory nonetheless. At least the Bever Park swimming pool is still here. That's where I had my first swimming lessons. Doesn't look like it's changed all that much. So this is All Saints Catholic School. This is where I attended school for kindergarten and first grade before we moved to Minnesota. This building really hasn't changed much. It still looks pretty much the same as it did when I was 5 years old. This over here was our playground for the kindergartners. I can still remember playing back over here. This playground equipment wasn't here at the time, but we would play kickball in that field over there. And this is All Saints Catholic Church, where we attended services every Sunday. Now, that section of the school was being built when we moved, but right over through these windows over here was my kindergarten class, and that part of the building that's kind of jettisoning out, that was the doorway to come in and out of the classroom. Over here was the playground for when I was in first grade, and I remember my mom was coming to pick me up one day, and she was talking to a lot of the other parents, and I was playing with some of the other boys, and we got scolded at by a teacher right in front of our parents for roughhousing. I don't know, but if it's me, an adult were to yell at one of my girls in front of me, I would go effing berserk. It's quite amazing the stuff that you remember even all these years later. Didn't even need the GPS to remember how to get to my old school and church and how to get to Bever Park. And that was the case with this next stop as well. This was the street that I grew up on for 5 years of my early childhood. And this right here was my childhood home. It's a quite balmy December day here in Cedar Rapids, so I thought I'd get out and take a walk in the old neighborhood. I haven't walked down these sidewalks in over 35 years. I forgot how steep this was. I remember slipping and sliding down this stretch of sidewalk with my dad in the winter time. Luckily the snow is melting and I'm not having a repeat performance here. I thought I'd get a outside the car view of the house for posterity, as Adam the Woo says. My bedroom was the second window from the right. This is where my sister and I picked up a pellet of fertilizer and ate it because we thought it was salt. I remember my dad was with us and he about flipped out, called the Poison Control Center, and they basically reassured him that we weren't gonna die and all we needed to do was maybe drink a few sips of water and some milk and we would feel better. And I guess now that I have kids of my own, I can kind of understand the freak out part, because I probably would have reacted the exact same way had I not known any better. And people who live in Iowa will know all about Hy-Vee, the grocery store chain, and first grocery store I remember shopping at. We didn't shop at this particular location, but it still brings back memories nonetheless every time I see a Hy-Vee. So I stopped inside Hy-Vee to grab a bag of the kitchen cooked potato chips, which are made in Farmington, Illinois, not too far from where I went to college at Illinois State University. In fact, I discovered kitchen cooked potato chips while going to school there, and anytime I see them, I try to pick up a bag and take them home. And I figured they were sold here at the Hy-Vee in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so got me a bag of kettle cooked, kitchen cooked chips for the ride home. Traveled over to the Indian Creek Nature Center, a place I visited several times as a kid, and one of the features inside their new building here in the visitor center is they brought a way to bring Indian Creek into the building. You got all kinds of really cool species and things like that that you can see on display here. Looks like that's a taxidermied beaver. Actual turtles here inside this fountain. There's one right over there. So the Indian Creek Nature Center, their visitor building right behind me, was open in 2016, so that was my first time checking that place out. Used to be in an old barn that is still here, but the lady was telling me that it's no longer up to code, so they can't really let visitors in there anymore. But the old barn was what I remembered of this place. This was like stepping into the 21st century with 1980s memories. The Indian Creek Nature Center is actually going to be celebrating their 50th anniversary in 2023. We got 5 miles of trails along Indian Creek here. We'll do a short little nature walk to see what else this place has to offer since the last time I was here. And I'm gonna call it a day. Well, you don't think of Iowa as having hills that you gotta climb up, but I guess when you're in a river valley, that's what happens. So I really appreciate you joining me on this journey through Cedar Rapids. You know, I figured I'd been kind of steadily growing an audience here on YouTube, slowly but surely. Nothing big, but there's definitely people that are starting to kind of catch on to my videos and follow them. Subscriber numbers have just surpassed 200, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of just get personal and share some information about myself. So I hope you enjoyed that video, even if it was kind of strayed from the usual content. But anyway, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like and subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. There's other ways you could help me out in growing the channel. I'll put links down in the description below. Anyways, this is Mike Allen from Chicagoland signing off from the Indian Creek Nature Center here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'll be back next week with another video, but until then, don't you go changing. Now it's time for me to get in my car, put on some Tears for Fears, and transport myself back into the 80s as I leave town.